Very much for inviting us here today. We get to see each other at a bunch of different forums, and it's always, in my opinion, a great way to hear what other folks think are important items for our city, because I think that's what you want out of folks that are seeking these offices, is not only our passion that we have for the office, but also a willingness to listen and lend voice to the important concerns that many of you find in your businesses and your family. So my name is Robert Thoms. I'm currently the city councilman from District 2, which you're right in the heart of, which is largely northeast Tacoma, all throughout the port, through downtown, and in the north end where I live with my family, my 6-year-old, now 7-year-old. He turned 7 on Saturday, and my 3-year-old and my wife, Beth. And the reason why I'm here today is because in my life, whenever there's been an opportunity to serve, I've served. My life has always been about service, so is my wife's. We're very involved in the community in various endeavors, and I believe in my life, it was imparted to me by my family that the best way to get involved, the best way to make a difference is to go seek out things where you could serve your fellow man, and I consider that to be a great honor. I was appointed to the City Council back in January unanimously when Jake Fye, who used to represent the 2nd District, was elected to go represent us in Olympia in the 27th Legislative District. And since being elected, I believe I've hit the ground running and done a lot of important things that constituents such as yourself have brought to my attention. First, as discussed earlier today with the Prop 1, I came on the council and shared with some of my colleagues, and it's probably the Navy in me. I've been in the Navy now 20 years and currently serve as a commander in the U.S. Navy Reserves, running a unit down in California, is that we needed to have better plans and better processes within the way that we run our government here in Tacoma. And it's partly because I've had experience working on issues for Tacoma both in Washington, D.C. and Olympia. And I'm a big fan of processes because I believe when you don't have a plan, it's very difficult to execute a plan. And I believe execution is what people want from their government. They want to know that there are issues that are out there that we have in the common, that none of us can solve individually, and that they have the right partner in their government. And I believe very strongly that that's what I want to see Tacoma be. I want Tacoma to be an effective partner for you. I want it to perform for me. I want it to perform for my family, and I want it to perform for our economy. So I'm constantly looking for opportunities for that. So we did the Transportation Master Plan, which allowed us to start putting some kind of construct to how these various projects are going on in our city and how we can control them as Tacoma, whether it be WSDOT, Amtrak, the link, and the like. Also, I worked hard to create a local preference ordinance that we passed earlier this year that provides opportunities for our local businesses to compete better for local contracts. It's the first one in the state that I'm aware of, because usually these bids go out to the lowest responsible bidder. I'll tell you a little bit more about me later. Thank you.
Thank you for having us here this morning. As Robert said, we've been seeing a lot of each other in these rooms, so we really appreciate the opportunity. I am a business owner downtown. My husband and I chose to put our home and our 2 businesses in a commercial property that used to be an old meatpacking plant. Market Street used to be where the vibrancy was, and everybody came down to buy their vegetables and their fish and their meat, and we live in one of those old meatpacking plants. I'm a business owner for 10 years. I came from the service industry of cosmetology and was a corporate educator for 10 years, experienced downsizing, and decided to start my own business. I'm the co-founder of Go Local, which is an organization that supports independently owned business. And the importance of that for our region is that more money stays in the region when we support independent business. And we have about 7,000 of those in Tacoma. So the charge is to connect those businesses, and they're not just small businesses. One of our largest employers, Simpson, is privately owned. So it's not just about mom and pop, it's about the independence of the ownership and what it brings to the community. So part of my intention is to help us map out all of our assets and our businesses so that we can really build a strong local economy. Also, I have a keen ability to bring people together around a shared vision and looking for the commonalities so that we can find things that we can move forward together with. There are always a lot of different agendas and different desires from constituencies, and it makes it hard unless we have something to really move forward together on. And this is a pretty diverse district. You have 3 neighborhood councils, 4 neighborhood business districts, our economic engine's right in the center. We have a downtown core that we've been trying to revitalize for the past couple decades, and there's a lot going on here, and I think that somebody like myself with a collaborative nature and a strategic mind can bring us together around some things that we share. So.
All right, before we take questions from the audience, Patricia, would you like to ask Robert a question?
Prop 1 seems like a very good tool for us to use. What's missing in the plan for that for you, or what's the rub?
Well, I don't, I've now knocked on more than 7,000 doors, and I too agree, as both speakers have, that roads are the #1 issue that I'm hearing in the community. And I believe Councilman Mello is absolutely right. Those who are in charge of making decisions cannot wait when there's such a pressing issue. So I'm looking forward, we're less than a month away from hearing from the voters that they believe this is the right type of tool to address our streets. As discussed earlier, we did create this year as well a Fiscal Sustainability Commission that is also looking at other tools that could be at our avail to create sustainable opportunities for our community. Because that's really what the challenge is that we have a community here that needs investments. And in our infrastructure, it hasn't been done in a sustainable way in more than a decade, if not 2. And so it's very important that we create the type of long-term funding that allows us to be very strategic in how we do our streets, how we do our infrastructure. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the voters, and if this is the right tool, wonderful. It won't be the last. There'll be other things that we need to tinker with, because we're always looking to change policy to make it better for businesses to invest here, that they know they have the right type of partner for doing investment in our downtown and throughout our city. So I think this is just a great continuation of our budget discussion that we had over the last 18 months of how we as Tacoma are going to lead ourselves into the future and make sure that we protect our port jobs. Unlike other parts of the country where 1 in 10 jobs are port or trade related, 4 in 10 in our state are. So we're ahead of the curve. We're on the Pacific Rim, and I want to protect those jobs and put the right type of infrastructure into the city.
Robert, would you like that? Patricia, of course.
Well, I could ask you the same thing. What do you believe about Prop 1, and what would you like to do beyond Prop 1?
Well, I think the question was what's missing, or what could we have done differently? And so, as I see it, the tool of Prop 1 was put on the table for the Sustainability Commission, and in hindsight, I wish it would have stayed there so that the community could have come around that as a tool and other options to decide exactly what to do and give a really comprehensive solution, because we do need to fix our roads. Our roads are a reflection of our self-esteem, and they're a reflection of not maybe planning as well as we could have over the years, and it's very important for us to do that. I wish that it would have stayed on the table for the commission so that they could have come to the table with the best solution possible. I feel like it was a little rushed putting it on the ballot. And the rub for me is that even though as a consumer, I wouldn't mind paying $4 or $5 more a month to have our roads fixed, how is it going to impact our businesses? And I don't think that that was looked at deeply enough. And I think that there's an unfortunate consequence that might happen with our port businesses and our manufacturing businesses that's going to have a very negative impact.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to go out to the audience here. It would be nice if you have a question to stand up, pose it to the 2 candidates. Again, each is going to have about 90 seconds to respond. I think Robert's been going first, so we'll allow Patricia to go first on the next question, but I'll try and moderate this. So I saw Virginia's hand go up first. Could you please stand up, project out to the audience? Didn't hear you.
I live near the Proctor district, and I'll have to admit that I've been gone for the better part of the month of September, so I don't know what the most recent developments are. But there has been talk about allowing what I consider superstructures in some of these small community neighborhoods where the current buildings are at most 3 stories high, and most of them are 2 stories high. Are you in favor of allowing 6 to 10-story high buildings in these developing areas, despite what I consider what that would do to the neighborhoods?
I guess I'll go first on that one. I don't have the luxury of being a council member up to this point, so I don't know all the details. I do know that there was some work on the mixed-use areas, 17 of them over the last few years. I am a fan of creating density in both our downtown core and our neighborhood business districts, but again, there's always unintended consequences and how that impacts the neighboring, houses and structure there. And so I think what's really important is that we make sure that we are doing great public outreach so that everybody in the neighborhood who will be affected gets to have an input in that. I know that there are some possible negatives that are perceived to be future negatives for businesses. In the possibility of that being created, there will be displacement of businesses with hope of new businesses, but there's always two sides to that, and I think we need to do better on the community outreach for that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The changes that you're speaking of were done in previous years to allow for greater heights in certain areas in our mixed-use centers to go from, some were limited at 45 and allowed to go up to 65 plus bonuses. So they're very different zones across the city. So I agree with Patricia to the degree that changes are made in those types of policies. Certainly you want to get the word out and make sure that folks understand. There were changes that actually allowed us to do the different refurbishments that were done to Safeway and to the Metropolitan as well. The Safeway improvements that you recently saw in the last couple of years were also part of the changes that were made a few years ago in our mixed-use centers. So it's always a constant challenge. I sort of am a supporter of the idea of allowing additional heights as long as they're in character with the neighborhood and it's in concert with the various neighborhood councils that work on that. And it was my understanding that the North End Neighborhood Council was very active, and actually I know for a fact they were very active in the mixed-use centers. They're a leader in that. So I'm a fan of density as well. I believe as long as you do it smartly, you make sure that you take care of on-street parking, you also provide a way to mitigate the impact to the surrounding neighborhoods. That's the best way to do it. So I'm a fan of the density, and it just needs to make sure that folks understand that what the options are, the elements of the development. And I believe the one you're talking about is just on the other side of the Northwest shop. So as I understand it, that's Mr. Bill Evans, and I would encourage you, if you have specific questions to him about the development plans, you might ask him.
Thank you. Bob, I think you had your hand raised from before. So ask Robert, go first. Please ask a question.
Paid sick leave, I know, is an issue that's going to be coming before the City Council, and we have a lot of business owners here, and would like your thoughts on that issue.
Philosophically, I'm for making sure folks who are victims of domestic violence, who may have a family illness that precludes them from being able to work, have protections. And as I understand, there are protections where you cannot just outright be fired as a result of being sick or a victim of domestic violence. But they are very difficult to do when you're dealing with, if any of you have ever dealt with LNI, it's not the most friendly organization to work with. But I've never been a big fan in all my time of working on legislative stuff. I've been working on legislative policy for 20 years now, and I've never found that it's very good to do any policy block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, city by city, county by county. So I've been supportive of it at a national level and at a state level, because I believe these type of legislative matters are best when they're implemented fairly across an entire area versus one city versus the other. And I think Tacoma and our region already have some idiosyncrasies as it relates to policy that put us at a competitive disadvantage. So I've not been a big fan of implementing it just city-wide right now. I would continue to ask that our leaders at the state level and the national level push to do it, so we're not putting ourselves at a competitive disadvantage.
I would agree with that, absolutely. We can't have any more barriers to business in Tacoma that sets us apart from our neighboring cities. I've been at the table with this conversation with the Healthy Tacoma from the beginning, because I wanted to be a voice for business. We can't create policies in a vacuum where only one side is getting the input. And I agree with Robert, it resonates with me philosophically, but logistically it doesn't work. And it doesn't work when we are, again, creating a barrier against our competition with another city. So, I would be willing to be at the table to look at this, to tear it apart and find out what we really are trying to get to. Sometimes we try to hit everything with a hammer, and really how can we thank our businesses who are doing it right and get examples of how we can incent other activities and other practices from other businesses rather than blanketly creating a mandate. So it is my commitment to making sure that there is principle number 3 around this idea, that it is to support business prosperity, and I'm committed to being the one that at the table that challenges whether or not it does that.
Rod?
We talked a little bit about roads. Pacific Avenue's been under construction for many months. I'd like you each to give it a letter grade, A, B, C, or D, and then I'd like to have you say why you gave it that grade.
The Pacific Avenue streetscape in itself, you would like a grade? Or construction on Pacific?
Of all the priorities we have.
Oh. Wow, can I only give you a grade or can I give you some background on that?
Oh, both.
The Pacific Avenue streetscape is something that we received as an afterthought of the $800,000 or whatever the money was that Norm Dix was able to acquire when we were trying to keep Russell. And as much as I like improvements and making sure that we are beautifying our neighborhoods, it was an interesting time, of course, that they chose to do this. I've been here for almost 10 years as a business, and I've seen Pacific Avenue ripped up many, many times. As the Downtown Merchants Group president, I always represented the inconveniences for businesses and made sure that we are not doing construction during the holidays and mitigating that as much as possible. I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful project when it's done, and even though we get federal grant monies, there's always resources and other monies that we have to put towards that as well. And it's very unfortunate when we see things being done, as Robert was talking about earlier, lowest bid, because many times we see them done wrong. And we've already seen Pacific Avenue in pieces of it be done 3 times. So I think it's probably about a C-. I'm hoping when it's done, it's closer to a B with its physicalness, and we forget, but it has been very inconvenient and unfortunate.
Thank you for the question. I started out, this project was already sort of afoot when I was appointed to the council, at least the decision to do it. And it is true that it was the vestiges of some promises that were made as it related to trying to court Russell to stay here. And I actually think the nucleus of that was very true. And it sort of disappoints me that we didn't even throw the ball further down the field as it relates to, there were a lot of promises. I was in those meetings when we discussed what we as a city were going to do to keep the Russells of the world here in Tacoma. And it's the same discussions I had when I was working in Senator Campbell's office and the city was saying what it was going to do to have the Cohens take over the former Superfund site. We contorted ourselves in all these different directions of what we were going to do. We were going to let you do this, we're going to let you do that. And as soon as someone took it on, it became the normal red tape, situation. So as it relates to Pacific Avenue, I started in the first number of meetings when we were talking about the schedule and stuff, feeling that this could absolutely be an A project. I would also give it a C, simply because it has lingered on beyond timeframes. It has not, in many instances, been able to do what we say we were going to do to the impacted businesses. And in the future, I would like to create a mechanism by which each and every time the city takes on a project like this, we create a baseline number. We go to the merchants and say to them, what is your payroll or your receipts for the last 3 months? That acts as a baseline. So when we get into a project and we get beyond a certain time and we hit that trigger, we can say to them, we have to figure out a way to understand how much of a hit you took. Because currently we don't even have a process to even adequately say to a business, oh, well, you weren't really impacted by the fact that went over 3 or 4 months. We can actually empirically say, yeah, your receipts the previous 3 months were this, and now they're this. And that's a problem. They were X and now they're Y, and how are we going to, as a city, help them?
I saw your hand shoot up, Chris.
So on a follow-up.
Can you stand up, please?
So on a follow-up, you find the baseline, you know the impact. What are you going to do about it? Is there insurance? how's the city gonna make them whole?
I think that, I mean, that's the problem with my idea. When I brought it up to our folks on the staff, obviously, we don't have some huge reserves, but it doesn't change the fact that at least I'm a big fan of having plans, again. And this city has been for many years not run in what I believe to be a way that can provide trust and predictability for our business community or for the residents. It's been very episodic, and I'm frankly tired of it. It doesn't have to be episodic. Processes can be replicated. Successes can be duplicated. And so what I'm suggesting to you is even if we do not have a pot of reserves to say, hey, we're going to make you whole, at least we can understand and say, you know what, you're right. It has impacted you by 30%. And you know what we need to do about that? We need to make sure we hold our contractors accountable the next time. I've done housework in my house before, and we've not paid people that didn't do the work they were supposed to do in a timely fashion, right? So there's a lot of stuff we can do within contracting, and I'm convinced, and I've talked to well over 50 businesses as it relates to not only sick leave, but also Pacific Avenue, trying to understand what their impacts were of it and how negative they were. And instead of being in the nebulous, I'd like to be in the real factual realm of how much did it cost you, what was the real impact, and how are we going to do it different? Because I'm tired of doing things the same way and getting the same mediocre results. Because what we have in Tacoma is a tremendous opportunity that is, we have the water, we have the Olympics, we have Mount Rainier, we have a wonderful group of businesses and people, and it is time for us to not just have squatters' rights about Tacoma, but actually stand up and lead the community. And that's what I'm committed to doing.
As a business owner, I know that a plan is great, but without a vision, I don't know what I'm planning to. And one of the things that we were missing in Tacoma is a shared vision and a clear vision. It's hard to expect somebody to meet an expectation when we haven't clearly set that out. As the Downtown Merchants Group president years ago, we suggested things to the city like, very much like Robert is talking about, getting a baseline of sales, bodies coming in the door. And what we can do about that is there are ways to put something into a project. We do a 1% when you build new developments for arts projects. There should be a percentage within that particular bid and that project that deals with marketing, that deals with signage, that deals with things that can help the businesses so that they can make it through that time and that we are bringing the vibrancy here through that time of inconvenience. So there are things that we can do.
So I think we can have you guys each do a 3-minute wrap-up if you want, or if you'd like to keep filling questions to the end and forego the wrap-up. Can you guys agree? Or what would you guys do? Questions from the audience, or would you like to do a wrap-up?
One more question. We can make our wrap-up small.
Yeah, we don't have to do 3 minutes.
Okay. I think Dan had his hand up first.
Okay. I'm a small business owner in the city of Tacoma, and my least favorite tax is the B&O tax, both having the state B&O tax and the city B&O tax. And I know we're not going to get rid of it. I know we need it, but I've long felt that we should have an apportioned B&O tax that would go to the state and then be apportioned back to the city. Is this wishful thinking, and or what are your thoughts generally on the B&O tax?
Well, I certainly have been in favor of not increasing it, and I think that's been something that Tacoma's been successful in thus far, is not seeking to increase it as some others have. I think that's a good option to put forth before the Fiscal Sustainability Commission as an option to look for the apportionment. So if it has it, I'll have to get you a list of all the things that they've thus far put on the table. But if they have not put that on there, you might suggest that to them, or I can for you. Because I believe all options should be there, because that is the group of people that we've created through the community to try to come up with what the next 100 options are for our fiscal sustainability challenges moving forward. And I think all options should be on the table because I trust the collective wisdom of this room more so than I trust my own wisdom on some of these things. And so I think what I've learned as a leader is that you want to be part of the right team. You don't need to necessarily be the quarterback of the team all the time, but you definitely want to be on the right team. And so that task, the commission's been charged with coming up with the next list of tools. And if that's not on there, I'll go ahead and suggest that as well, if you give me your name. Thank you.
The B&O tax is one of those things that is often the first perception that is inhibitive to our businesses. I have a business that is right at that threshold of the two years ago, they moved the threshold to $250,000 for the exemption. For businesses that are $250,000 revenue or less are exempt from the city portion of it. B&O is split between state B&O and city B&O. As much as anybody, I'd love to see that go away, but there's no way to make it go away because it needs to be revenue neutral. It is very layered though, and I think that we need to look at restructuring the B&O and really look at the layers of it and what it does. For one thing, I think that a portion of our B&O, especially for the city, again, needs to go back into helping business. It can't just filter into the general fund. If us as a business are paying that, how can we utilize that to make our business fabric and our foundation for businesses better? The other part of that is that we miss some money actually on the table through the B&O because of the way that the language is. So I know of a business in Tacoma who does a lot of business outside the region and in other countries, and because their city revenues don't match $250,000, they're not taking their payment that they would like to pay for their city portion of business. So it's not apples to apples, and it really needs some restructuring so that we can make that B&O work for us.
Thank you. We're drawing to a close here. I know we like to get out here at 8 a.m. sharp, so we'll allow each candidate 90 seconds to wrap up. I think Robert went first, so Patricia, we'll allow you to go first here, and then Robert can go last.
I thank you for this time here today. I'm passionate about Tacoma. I know that we have many, many great assets. We could do a much better job at leveraging those assets and connecting the dots. I know how arts, education, and employment connect to each other. I know that we can be the jewel in this region, and we just need to tell the story, but we all need to get together and figure out what the story is first. People are too afraid to actually take the risk and say what we are. We've been spending too much time trying to be Seattle or trying to be Portland, and we are who we are, and we're great. And we need to work with what we've got, and we need to leverage our assets and make sure this works well. I do have the sole endorsement of the gentleman who served this seat for 7 years before me, and I think that's probably my most important endorsement, and I hope to serve you on the city council.
Well, thank you again for inviting us here and for sharing your questions with you. As we close out the remaining weeks of this race, I want you to know that I'm still working very hard for you and for Tacoma. It's been a tremendous honor to be appointed to this position. I believe I bring a lot of good qualities and good leadership experience over 20 years managing budgets, managing personnel, both in the Navy and then also on my policy work. So I bring a great deal of passion and experience as it relates to how to make government work well. I've served Tacoma and worked for them in issues, like I said earlier, from in Washington, D.C. and Olympia. And I think it's actually very important because we're at a crucial time in our future here, in my mind, of Tacoma, in that we are starting to see things move. And that's really wonderful, but in order to be able to be successful, we have to have a long-term vision, a long-term set of goals, and a long-term set of principles that we're going to guide ourselves on to how we're going to be successful in the future. And I think the future is very bright here because unlike a lot of places that are left with only having a consumer-based economy, we have a very robust manufacturing and trade economy, and we also need to have a better consumer-based economy where we provide the type of amenities that we all deserve. And I'm going to be focused like a laser, block by block, in downtown trying to figure out how to create density, how to create better opportunities for dining, better opportunities for shopping, better opportunities to make sure that this is a type of place that we can all be proud of. I want it to be the place that my kids want to return to when they get older, and I look forward to working with each of you to make that happen. Thank you very much.